But for those that knew my dad, he was also a mailman, and he had the Quindaro area, the same route for over 30 years. And that's where we talk about Freeman University, Western University, Douglas Hospital, etc. You won't see that today, but that's where the title originates. So you're going to watch a sneak preview that is essentially a movie. So if you'd be kind enough to silence your phone, put them on vibrate, whatever, if you like, fine. We appreciate it. And we will have questions and answers afterwards, as well as one last slide that is self-explanatory when we get to it.
If you have that drive and you have given the opportunity, there's nothing you can't accomplish.
To the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days of the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is a constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham.
My brothers and I would always look forward to the 4th of July because that was a holiday. Dad didn't have to go to work at his job at the post office. We'd get up and start with firecrackers as soon as Mom would let us, right after breakfast. Dad would come out later. He liked to shoot fireworks more than we did, and that was saying a lot. We were about 8 or 9, so we couldn't shoot the big stuff like cherry bombs, but Dad did. He'd have the biggest grin on his face and run like the wind after lighting one. Boom! He'd make a tin can blow up 20 feet. It seemed almost as high as the cottonwood tree across the street back then. It would always end too soon because he had to go to work on his second job. That job, the show, knew no holiday. He was a motion picture projectionist at the Princess Theater and several others around town. Some of the busiest times at the show were during the holidays, and the show couldn't go on if no one was there to run the movies. Holidays were especially tough on Mom. It just didn't seem like Christmas or Thanksgiving were special. Just another day when Dad had to work. It was a sacrifice that other folks, firemen, nurses, policemen, doctors in the community made to put food on the table. If he wasn't scheduled, most times he'd substitute for others to get the increased holiday pay. Dad's second job was really his first when he was growing up. A projectionist taught this skill to my grandfather in Hiawatha, Kansas, a small rural town about 90 minutes north of Kansas City as the crow flies, where he and my grandmother were born and later married. Both sides of Dad's family came out of Kentucky and Tennessee after the Civil War. We're confident they were part of the Exodusters movement into Kansas after Reconstruction in the late 1870s. Census information and a family diary hint as much. Dad and his older sister Alice were born in Hiawatha too, roughly 50 years after the Civil War. There weren't many job opportunities for a growing black family in a small agricultural town in 1921. So Dad and his family moved to Kansas City, Kansas when he was about 3 years old, walking distance to Grandpa's pre-arranged job at the Princess Theater. Dad started working as an apprentice when he was about 9 or 10 years old. He had to stand on a milk crate to see out the little window to start or change machines on cue. It took 2 machines to run a movie in those days. My grandfather taught him and Dad taught me as well as my brothers. The 1921 Princess Theater back then was on the northeast corner of 3rd and Parallel. Later, it moved to Fish Street between Franklin and Richmond in 1934. It was owned by a Greek family, George and Louis Eliopis Ellis. They owned several theaters: United Theaters, Princess, Regal, Castle, and the 63rd Street Drive-In. There were 3 different owners of 8 theaters in the metropolitan area that catered to black patrons. Dad learned to run movies when silent movies were being shown. An organist provided musical sound effects, from a whistle blowing to gunshots, while the movie ran. Dad and Grandpa were well known locally in the 30s and 40s as being the only 2 black motion picture operators in Kansas City. They were skilled laborers. Kansas City was somewhat different from other cities. where segregation meant white and black people in a theater were separated by aisles or balconies. The Electric and Granada theaters fit this category. Local Kansas City theaters catered mostly to black or white patrons, normally not both. The family that owned the Princess and other local theaters were astute business owners. They saw a need that wasn't being addressed and met the demand. The shows were mostly in neighborhoods and weren't integrated for the most part. That changed as integration in public places became law and more widespread. Dad was almost 12 when the Great Depression hit. A whole lot of people, both black and white, were out of work. Out of work meant you had to make do with what you had. Clothes and shoes had to last. Food was stretched and faith tested. Times were tight and edgy. Grandpa's job was safe because during hard times, people went to the movies as a means of escape. Still do. The price about 25 cents. Entertain you for a few hours with cartoons, a newsreel, and a main feature, or sometimes a double feature.
And a couple of the boys will go along with you.
Dad helped his family make ends meet like everyone else did in the neighborhood. People helped each other too. He collected newspapers and soda pop bottles. He cut grass with his dad in well-to-do neighborhoods, along with assisting in the theater booth. Even though he was helping in the booth, I imagine it was also a way for him to escape for a minute, to ride on horseback, solve a mystery, or just laugh. He could only escape for so long before the little bell telling him to ready the next machine rang. It was a timing issue. Doing it right meant there was no dead space in changing from one machine to the other. A projectionist played an important role in presenting a movie. If done correctly, the change was invisible. It started on time, ran smoothly, and there were no interruptions. The viewer was able to enjoy the movie unaware of any diverted mishaps. The challenge for Dad came when he was offered Grandpa's job in his late teens. The theater owner had a falling out with Grandpa. Dad, fortunately, happened to be there painting. His ability to run the specialized machines offered a seamless transition. The owner knew it. Remember, this was during the Depression. Grandma was doing all she could, working as a receptionist for Dr. Dye, periodically babysitting and at Faultless Laundry. So what choice did he have? There was no time for, let me think about it, or, what do you want me to do, Dad? He had to provide a yes or no on the spot, and he did. Dad said the pay was good, but there were no benefits. Even though Grandpa had lost his main source of income, he now had more time available to fix slot machines. This was Kansas City in the 30s. A while back, I recognized a name in a book titled Open City by William Owsley. The book was about Kansas City, Missouri and its early history of organized crime. I had heard this name growing up. The man owned a candy store on 3rd Street. Dad confirmed that was the individual's name. He also had another store in the garment district across the river in Kansas City, Missouri, where Grandpa would sometimes take Dad and his sister Alice. So now, John Jr. was the breadwinner. It was a lot to ask of a teenager. Sometimes bills didn't get paid and utilities got shut off. It made for an awkward home setting, and life got a little bit tougher. What helped? School. It began with Dad's grade school, Stowe Elementary, and continued to Northeast Junior High. The schools all shared the same common denominator, mostly female administrators and instructors. Female teachers until the 50s could not be married. Students were treated like they were their children. It was a very nurturing family environment. Dad's secondary schools were an oasis from reality. Northeast Junior High and especially Sumner High School were breeding grounds for ambition, enlightenment, and preparation for the future. Expectations were high and demanding. There was a reason why: segregation. At the turn of the 20th century, Kansas schools weren't segregated. A fatal incident involving 2 young males, one black and one white, caused that to change in 1904. The Kansas legislature passed a law after the unrest and tension that amended the 1901 General Statutes in 1904. It was known as the Segregation Bill. Governor Edward Wallace Hoke saw the inequality of it all. He threatened to veto the bill unless 2 requirements were met. 1, build a comparable new building, and 2, provide equal pay for black teachers. Talk about an opportunity. News of the mandate spread quickly. Teachers with graduate degrees from around the country came to teach at Sumner. They were paid equal pay just like their white counterparts. It was literally separate and equal. Sumner received accreditation in 1914, 9 years later. That was impressive. If you were an African American student in Kansas City, Kansas back in the day, you attended a black grade school, Northeast Junior, and Sumner High School in that order, regardless of where you lived. Black students from the surrounding areas, Rosedale, Argentine, Armourdale, and as far away as Johnson County, came to Northeast and Sumner by bus. Black students walked by schools designated for white-only students to go to Northeast and Sumner. This didn't change until the 1954 Brown versus Topeka Board of Education decision. In 1929, 41% of teachers had master's degrees, and by 1935, that percentage jumped to 61%. They were graduates from Columbia University, Ohio State, Howard University, University of Kansas, Morehouse College, Oberlin College, and the University of Southern California, to name a few. This was fertile ground in which John Jr. and his fellow students flourished. You were expected to do your best because you were being taught by the best.
The best teachers that could be found in America came to Kansas, which is really the backdrop of why Sumner became probably one of the 10 best public high schools in America.
Sumner prepared you with tools to be successful. Not only that, teachers and administrators lived in the neighborhoods. They attended the same churches. Some taught Sunday school as well as being church officers. They had you coming and going. The environment was a hotbed of learning. Dad ate it up because he was a bookworm. He was impressed with the faculty, but 2 teachers stood out: Scotty P. Davis, English, and Alexander A.T. Edwards, coach in architectural drafting. John Jr. graduated from Sumner High School in 1936 with honors. The Great Depression lasted roughly 10 years from 1929 to around 1939. Tough times brought families together or tore them apart. Dad's family stayed together. Grandpa's bouts of depression, visits to Osawatomie State Hospital, and heavy drinking tried everyone's patience. Despite his problems, he was a talented man. He was mechanically inclined. My older cousin Clinton talked with amazement about how Grandpa fashioned a telescope-type contraption out of bottle glass and mirrors. He felt cheated out of being recognized for improving the 35mm projector's aperture. Someone else got the credit for it. Grandpa entered the state-run Kansas orphanage at Atchison at age 8. His brother Clarence entered at age 6. This was after their mother died in 1904. They were wards of the state until 18 years old. Both were farmed out to families at roughly 10 years old. My remembrance of him, I never saw him smile. My grandmother Clintonia was a spiritually strong lady who led by example. She was a rock who was raised by her maternal grandparents when her parents went their separate ways 1 year after marriage. She was resilient and learned the importance of family love and support from William and Nancy Montgomery. I mentioned she worked for Dr. Dyer's office and later at the Sullivan family's home near the plaza. Grandmother worked long after she had to. She was quiet and dignified. Dad was dedicated to his mother. Soon after Dad finished high school, he worked at the show full-time and took college-level drafting courses with Mr. Edwards at Sumner Junior College. Sumner offered 2 years of courses for free after the 12th grade. According to Dad, Mr. Edwards hoped he would be encouraged to go to college and pursue an architectural career. Dad took classes when work permitted. His skilled projectionist job allowed him to stay employed when many black men faced discrimination in seeking employment. Dad could relate as well from a time he was told on the avenue he was wasting his time even applying. Over the next 6 years, he got into a job school routine. This was when he first met Mom. He was working at the Princess Theater and was on a break outside when she walked by on her way home from school.
She was about 15 years of age then, and I was 21. We dated all that time until September the 18th of 1946 was our marriage day.
Several years later, World War II was on the horizon. He registered as required and received a deferment. As the war heated up, his deferment changed and he was drafted. Dad's junior college credits at Sumner and strong entrance scores qualified him for an assignment in engineering, surveying, and building roads. It was exciting traveling outside of Kansas City for the first time to California and Boston. Separate off-base housing for Dad and 5 other classmates was provided. Dad completed Army Corps of Engineering training with honors, but had an accident breaking his leg before his group left for Europe. The Boston hospital and classrooms were not segregated, nor were the social dances. His hospital roommate was white. He was left behind and assigned a clerk position. He read a bulletin board notice during that time and learned that pilot replacements were being needed for the 99th Pursuit Squadron. He was curious and applied.
We started off with, I think, 45 individuals. We graduated 23.
Dad had only been as far south as Leawood, Kansas, cutting grass prior to serving in the Army. This would be an eye-opening experience for him in many different ways while traveling to Alabama. For instance, he had to move to a different train car, walk through designated colored entrances in train stations, and use colored drinking fountains and restrooms after crossing the Mason-Dixon line.
There is no way that color has anything to do with designating the skill, the capability, the desire of an individual. But if you have that drive and you have given the opportunity, there's nothing you can't accomplish.
Dad shared with me that he felt like many other black inductees, that he wanted to show white America that he was just as good as anyone else. They were willing to fight for democracy abroad and at home. Black newspapers created a slogan that captured this sentiment, a double victory for democracy, promoted by the Pittsburgh Courier. Baltimore Afro-American and Chicago Defender coined the phrase, "One victory overseas against fascism and another at home against Jim Crow." It caught fire. In 1943, he was allowed to take required Army Air Corps entrance exams. He didn't feel the exams were difficult. Thank you, Sumner High School. He passed them. So he went from the Corps of Engineers to the cadet training program. His solid school grounding prepared him for quick advancement. Training was twice as long for black pilots due to the Army Air Corps' resistance in shipping out able-bodied black combat pilots and crews. Black newspapers and Eleanor Roosevelt's flight with instructor Alfred Chief Anderson helped change perceptions. Approximately 500 of roughly 1,000 black pilots were deployed to the European theater from 1942 to 1945. Dad knew the sentiment around him. Being in the South was a new experience. He was out of his urban, albeit segregated bubble in Kansas City, Kansas, and into the overt Jim Crow countryside of Tuskegee, Alabama.
Colored entrances, black drinking fountains, white drinking fountains. Doorways, exit and coming in and going out, black entrance. And walking down the street, if you come in contact or pass by a person of different color, a Caucasian, you had to get off the sidewalk and let them pass. My first introduction to segregation in the Deep South.
The word was to stay on base and not go into town. Dad found enough to do on base. When the guys would sometimes leave the base on weekends, he'd be the designated driver, since he didn't drink. One of his first instructors for the Piper Cub was a black instructor named John Williams. Time was spent in the classroom learning aeronautics and flight ground training. This is where he learned flying's nuts and bolts, while understanding what his instructors did with the controls. The stick, manipulating the ailerons, the flaps, trim tabs, rudder controls, lift of the wings by manipulating foils that made the plane go up or down. His personal preference was to be a single-engine fighter pilot because lighter ships offered greater maneuverability and fighter responsibility. His smaller size was more in demand for fighters too. He enjoyed solo flight. He said flying came easy to him. I don't know if it took him back to being in the projection booth or what, but he seemed to enjoy flying. He said it was just like driving a car.
That's all it took. Just like driving the car, the more you drive it, the better you drive it.
Dad shared an encounter about a time when his AT-6's instrument panel was faulty. He ended up landing on a similar airstrip like Tuskegee's, same ships, same markings, but roughly 20 miles off course. Dad was as surprised as the white cadets on the ground when he pulled the canopy back. Whatever way they conveyed their amazement led him to do something that seemed out of character for straight-laced John Jr. He matter-of-factly told me he did a barrel roll over the airstrip as he was leaving. Not showboating, just an elementary maneuver. Like others, Dad never really talked about his time in the service or what it was like to fly above the clouds. His father used to take him and Aunt Alice to Fairfax Airport to watch the planes take off and land, so he had an early introduction to aviation. He never shared out loud any amazement about how far aviation had come since the Wright brothers' 1903 maiden flight at Kitty Hawk to his ability to fly a P-47 Thunderbolt in 1945 that could reach speeds upwards of 500 miles per hour and fly at an altitude of 20,000 feet. Dad was ready to put the service behind him and get back to civilian life after the war ended, prematurely for him since he didn't get overseas. He had traveled from one end of the country to the other and received training as a combat pilot. He went in as a buck private and advanced in 1 year to a tech sergeant. Those 5 stripes and being an older cadet put him in a leadership position, cadet captain or class flight leader. He entered the Air Corps as such and left as a lieutenant with wings. Now it was time for Second Lieutenant John H. Adams, Jr. to get back to supporting his mother and father, as well as starting a new family. Later in life, he balked at the notion of being trained to fly a killing machine with the potential loss of life and limb. He embraced the double victory idea at the time, but reflected that his personal contribution didn't add much to its success. He felt he had a greater impact on the local motion picture operator union, Local 170, becoming integrated. He was ambitious and identified challenges. Tasks were before him: marriage, secure his old job, or get a better paying job to help his family. He also wanted to explore his self-improvement desires by going to school to become an artist. Dad had dabbled in sketching and liked it. He thought it was worth pursuing. Why not? The GI Bill, at least in his case, would cover it. Dad once told me, after he came back from the service to his parents' home, he wandered into the kitchen, opened the pantry, and saw just a few bare necessities. He told Grandma, "We don't have to eat like this anymore." A new chapter had begun. John Jr. married Barbara Jean and got his guaranteed for a year motion picture job back. He realized that in the 3 years he was away, things had dramatically changed. Union jobs were more plentiful and paying better wages even for black people, but still job discrimination persisted. More women were in the workforce since many men had been away in the service. People were able to buy things they hadn't bought for some time, if ever. There was a feeling of prosperity and hope. A dark cloud had been lifted, somewhat. John Jr. created options for himself. He became his own boss, doing manicured lawns, sometimes with his brother-in-law Walter. Being a referred, trusted houseman for theater owners' families and others in upscale Leawood. He also went back to school, completing 2 years of junior college, and was accepted into the Kansas City Art Institute, KCAI, where he finished his last 2 years of undergraduate school. It was ambitious and very tough. John Jr. had to work physically demanding multiple jobs, night and day. Theater responsibilities ranged from being a projectionist to a relief operator to union business manager. He focused primarily on saving for a home and his now budding family. He tried to help his parents as best he could, all while making time to start his master's degree at KCAI. Art school was challenging. Classes were integrated, but racial fraternization was frowned upon. There weren't enough hours in a day, it seemed, but he got it done. Bachelor of Fine Art, 54, and Master of Fine Art, 56. He was the only student to receive a master's degree in the graduating class of 1956. These tools allowed him to market his skills in painting, wall murals in upscale homes, commercial sign painting, calligraphy, and portraitures. He was ready for business. Selling your wares as an artist in the mid-50s as a black man was challenging. There was truth in the saying, starving artist. Dad's clientele for painting and house and yard services read like a who's who. Ziegler's, Hudson Vandergrifts of Hudson Orton, Kaplan's, Wolf Brothers, Culpepper's, Ed Brown Chrysler, and others. Nothing like options.
Mr. John Adams was a wonderful gentleman. He not only delivered our mail, but was someone who always had a kind and positive word to say. After a while, we realized he had other special God-given talents. He wanted to do portraits of my parents. He had such skills and patience. After the sittings, finished works were revealed. What a beautiful rendering of the warmest and loving people in my life. He painted them exactly as who they were and what they represented. You could feel the love and professionalism in his work. He was an amazing, talented person with skills he used to make the world a better place. He shared his blessing with us, a genuine man of God.
What'd you think?
All right.
Thank you. I'm going to take questions and answers now. The brochure you have, there's a frequently asked question panel that may answer some of your questions. So we won't have to worry about being redundant. The point is, you've got enough information on that we appreciate you flipping it and tearing it off and providing feedback, comments, etc. You can leave them with me or on the table or whatever. Also on that brochure, you have an email address if you'd like to extend comments or whatever. There's an email address that you can do that. I want to introduce the narrator.
You know, I pretty much grew up with this gentleman. I have a photograph of us on a Christmas in 1954. And so we have known each other all of our lives, basically. And when he approached me to be a part of this project, I just had to say yes. My mother and his mother were very good friends. And so I grew up knowing Aunt Barbara and Uncle John. So this project has been able to teach me some things and remind me of some things. And the whole project is a history of Kansas City, Kansas during this time period through the eyes and the experiences of John Henry Adams Jr. What you have seen today is only a portion. That's what, section 4, it goes through section 4?
Yeah, up to 4.
Yeah, okay. And we have 10 sections. So there's a lot more. There's a lot more to learn and to see about this project. So basically, I would invite you to ask, if you have some questions, please feel free. Yes.
So when are you going to be on 60 Minutes?
Soon, I hope. Like John said, we've been dealing with this project now for about 3 years. And we are still in the process of finishing up. So what, January maybe, we should be pretty much clear. And so what would help us greatly is that if you would give us that feedback to see where we can improve things as we move along. And the hope is not only to have this project completed, but to also do some educational projects based on this for students, young people. And of course that will be a shorter version of what we're doing. and maybe even some literary work after that. So this is ongoing, and it's become what we call what I call a labor of love.
Sir, would you introduce yourself and tell us what high school you went to?
My name is Michael Patton, and I attended Wyandotte High School. My mother's family was from Plattsburgh, Missouri, which is just north of here. And at that time, their public school education, at least as far as African Americans were concerned, ended at 8th grade. So her family moved to Kansas City, Kansas, so she and her brothers and sister could attend high school. And she attended Sumner High School. So that is that Sumner connection in my family.
Have you guys made contact with the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. yet?
No, not yet.
Oh, please do.
We still have
They
our
do
hands
have some things from Kansas.
Oh, really?
The state of Kansas. But this is my first time hearing about him. It was so interesting. Music was excellent. The narration was good. The pictures were good. You guys are to be commended. Very well done.
I know you said your dad did the Quindaro area.
Right.
But was he ever in the area off 5th Street?
Well, he lived on 3rd Street for growing up. He may have done some backup, temporary filling in for other postal carriers at that time. He basically worked anywhere from 3rd Street on out to 38th Street. But his route was Quindaro. 31 years, I believe. Yes, ma'am.
I know they don't want to hear from me, but I want you to know I'm totally excited. I graduated from Sumner in '54. And when that man came to junior college, he was older than all of us. I never knew this about this man because he was kind of quiet and reserved. And I'm blessed today, whoever did this, I'm blessed today, I'm almost in tears, to know that this man is who he was because he didn't broadcast this. He really didn't. He was just a quiet man that walked around there. And when I looked and saw his face, I said, that's where this is him. You know, these people disappear out of your life and you don't know where they go. And I'll tell you, whoever did it, I'm totally excited to know about Mr. Adams because I didn't know this when going to school with him. He never said it. He was just a kind man that walked around quiet.
Well, I've known Uncle John all my life, and I was surprised at some of the things that came out of this. Yes, Chris.
I would like to say that I was married to the family. These are his great nieces and nephews over here. I did not know he was a Tuskegee Airman until I went to Books A Million at Legend and opened up a Tuskegee Airman book, and his name was the very first name, John H. Adams, Kansas City, Kansas. I had to call Butch and say, was your daddy a Tuskegee Airman? I was in the family, and he never talked about it.
What office, which post office did he carry out of?
It was the one on, I don't know the number, but it was roughly 18th and Quindaro.
18th and Quindaro?
Where the Quindaro Bank was. Okay. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Go ahead. You be careful.
Observing this is just, we're watching the detail, all the detail and time that John and Mike has put into this. It's exceptional. And hopefully, material like this can continue. You all haven't seen nothing yet. But at least, I might say that John was one of my Sunday school students. Taught him in Sunday school the first year. I knew his mother, but she was more active first year than his father. I knew his father well. But I am so excited about seeing this continue. These two men here just doing an exceptional job. So, thank you, John. And well, that's a commercial. He has a brother Bobby. Some of you may see Bobby Adams, who is a musician and does a lot of work at the clubs and stuff in Kansas City. So when you see the name of Bobby Adams, that's his youngest brother.
Baby brother.
Baby brother.
On that note, that was a good segue. This project wouldn't be half as good as we think it is if Mr. Owens, I still call him Mr. Owens, I'm sorry, wasn't involved. Mr. Owens used to tell me that I, as well as Carl Berry, used to make him go back and study up for the next Sunday school class he was going to teach.
And Dr. Favors, too. Matter of fact, we have a Sunday school class at 4 o'clock on that.
Deborah Dandridge was very helpful with, as you see in the brochure that was handed out, with advising us on the yearbook pictures that were used that you saw. And of course, the Sumner story writers, the 5 individuals that put that together. That's the story. What do you hear? One of our genealogy researchers that worked on the project. She didn't say anything about it. She didn't know she was going to be up here either. I didn't know you were going to be here. But anyway, a researcher, bar none. Many of you have heard the name or know Peter McGee, Lee Jackson. Okay. Craig Lindsay. And the organ instrumental music you heard, Reggie. There's a real short story I'm going to share with you. Some of you may already know it. But Craig and Reggie were in Craig's studios. And Reggie was warming up. I don't know what they were going to do. But he was just playing around on the organ. And Craig recorded it. We got it. As we know, that was one of the last recordings that Reginald ever did. I want to thank you for coming out and viewing this. What we're going to do is, at some point in time, hopefully before Thanksgiving, is put the piece that you saw on our website. We'll make it available through an invitation to the Alumni website, and you'll have access to it. That's it. Thanks for coming out. Oh, we have some. If you would, like I said earlier when I started, just tear off that last section. I think it was somewhere over there. And just leave that one section. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else need a brochure?
And email us your comments as well. You know, I wanted them to know what you thought.
Oh, yeah.
What you saw is changed.
Yeah. Okay.